Welcome to MaD Life, living your life in excellence and reaching your full potential. Hi, this is Dave Showman again, and this is podcast number 5. And I want to bring up a conversation that I had with my daughter. Now, the conversation kind of threw me off guard. We talked about the word misogyny. Now, I wasn't mentally prepared for the discussion, so I want to put that out there because she caught me off guard, and I say that again because she literally did. She believes that society is misogynistic. So I had to look up the word. And what misogyny means is basically a hatred of women. And the way the term was being used, and maybe she understands it or not, I'm not sure, but the way it came up for me was that it was being directed towards men, period. And I got very heated with her. Like, why is it okay for women to put men down and use this word willy-nilly? Use it as a means to gain control in conversations and stuff like that. But then I remembered an article. No, not an article. I remembered something that I took in class called microaggressions. So there's this thing that I found on the internet. Let me see if I could find it. And it's from this guy named Joe Court, PhD. And he wrote this article about misandry. And misandry is the hatred of men. So you got misogyny, hatred of women, and misandry, the hatred of men. So the title of the article is in Psychology Today. It's called Misandry, the Invisible Hatred of Men. Men face many microaggressions that we don't really think about. Okay? So a microaggression. So this is the class that I was talking about, was a microaggression. It was first coined by Harvard University professor Chester M. Pierce in 1970 to describe results and dismissal he regularly witnessed non-Black Americans afflicted on African Americans. So an example of a microaggression against Blacks would be, what are you? So this is towards a biracial person. Or a statement would be, you don't act like a Black person, or I'm colorblind. Why do you sound white, etc. So I think you guys get the idea of what a microaggression is towards Blacks. But there's also microaggressions that are being used in the LGBT plus community. So some of them are, I'm not being homophobic, you're being too sensitive is another one. The LGBT plus community is also hearing, so who's the man in the relationship is another microaggression. Or why are you so Jack on Will and Grace or Cam on Modern Family, etc. So these are all microaggressions that are being used. So I'm going to go into some other ones that I've heard against women. So these are women who are, I wouldn't work for a woman, right? So these are women that are in leadership positions, etc. Or she thinks like a man, so intended compliment, but it's not really. Quote, if you're being too emotional, you need to look at this logically. These are all microaggressions. Let me throw a couple more out here. I'm impressed that a woman can do that. I'm sure that's being heard all the time. And I'm pretty sure there's a whole bunch of other ones that are very offensive. But as a society, we take them as jokes, but they really aren't. So here's some microaggressions for misandry for men. So this is what women or other people have said, and even men on men have said these things. Men only think with their dicks. Now, don't be offensive, but that's the term. Or a man wouldn't understand. Or men can't hear the word no when rejected sexually. This is in the quotes. Really, you don't like sports? So this be from a man telling another man, really, you don't like sports? I've heard girls say that to men, too. He's artistic is another one. Or just be a man. Men are womanizers, man whores, man sluts, etc. So you guys get the idea. So here's one that's really offensive, and I think that women say a lot. I've heard women say things like, balls are gross, I hate them. If a woman overheard men talking about vaginas being dirty and disgusting, she'd surely think this was misogyny and microaggression, but why not the other way around? Why can't men say, hey, stop the microaggressions towards men too? We're sensitive too. We have feelings. It hurts our, talk. And I think the problem is that since we are in a patriarchy society, and it's slowly changing, which I'm glad, but it's not going fast enough. But so patriarchy, I'm using terms that I haven't used in a while, so bear with me, is where heterosexual white men have a privileged status in our society, but they don't recognize their own privilege. They don't even think about what they're saying and doing. They just think everything's fine. So these are the things that are kind of hard to describe to white males about their privilege. And even I've had discussion with other males about white privilege, and they don't see it. Even white women, when I tell them of privilege, say, we do have privilege. And it's hard for them to understand that. But I'm going to go back to the microaggressions. The microaggressions are these terms that we use that are very offensive, and we got to be careful with them because they hurt deep, and it perpetuates this misogyny, and it also perpetuates misandry, hatred towards men, hatred towards women. And so just joking about these things really affects people's society. So we got to be careful. So if you're going to have a discussion about, let's say, misogyny, then talk about misogyny from the point of how it's stacked up against women and how it's hard for them to understand, the difference between those two. Now again, I'm catching myself here because I almost did the microaggression. They are hard to understand. See, those theys and whats and those are vernaculars that get people in trouble. So I'm going to redo this. I'm going to say, microaggressions promote the idea of hatred. They might sound funny, but they are very sticky. Like Maya Angelou said, words stick on you, and they have they come to a life of their own. So I would love to see conversations about misandry and misogyny as a conversation on how we can change it, not by the view of complaining about it, but what can we do to change it? So like I said, when I was talking to my daughter, she threw me off guard. I got very offensive by some of the things that she was saying. And she twisted around thinking that I didn't care about her, that I was stomping all over her female ideals, which I wasn't. What I was trying to explain to her is that when you say I hate men, or men are hateful, or misogyny sucks, it's taken in a negative connotation. What better word could have been used would have been, hey, I've been experiencing these things on social media. I've been experiencing things on looks and how people react to them and beauty and everything else. And people are saying these microaggressions all the time. And so I'm going to try to stop doing the microaggressions towards other people. They're not funny if you really think about it, because I just don't want them to perpetuate this hatred, because deep down inside it's really hatred that we have towards people. So the article that this gentleman, talks about, John Court, he's a PhD in LMSW. He basically says that the language of hate and love. So I'm going to read this first part here. The old adage, sticks and stones may hurt my bones, but words can never hurt me, is wrong. Words can and do wound. They perpetuate norms that give rise to bigotry, misogyny, misandry, racism, homophobia, and more. Given how manliness, quote, is enforced by both men and women, is it any wonder that men have become fair targets for a running commentary of contempt? And so he goes on and he also says, even the absence of online discussions of microaggressions against men is itself a microaggression, because the absence renders the problem invisible. So this is why I'm trying to bring this up, because microaggressions are real, and they stem from hate and ignorance, and it causes bias and hatred, like he describes. And we need to talk about these things more. And hopefully this discussion that we talk about it will start getting people to think about the things that they say. Women say cruel things to men. Men say cruel things about women. The gay community and the LGBT community says bad things about both sexes sometimes, or however that works out, I don't know. And see, I'm speaking from a place of ignorance when it comes to the LGBT community, and I'm pretty sure people are going to correct me, which is great because I don't want to offend anybody, but there you go. But if we could just stop these microaggressions and have a legitimate conversation about this, I think that we can realize that the things that we say and the things that come out of our mouth do hurt. So to sum this up, he goes on and says, if pathologize men, when we assume something is wrong with a guy who doesn't like sports, isn't tall, dark, and handsome, or otherwise doesn't fit a manly stereotype, it also pathologizes men when we assume the worst transgressions of a few or characteristics of all. It doesn't help women or blacks or the LGBT individuals to engage in the sport of putting down men. We might begin by extending to men our sensitivity about the harm done by microaggressions. It could open the door to compassion, help us build a more humane world. I'm all about the more humane world. Let's stop putting down men. Let's stop putting down women, especially women. Let's stop putting down the LGBT community. And let's really talk about why these microaggressions exist and how we can end them. And so the next time I have a talk with my daughter, hopefully I'm better prepared. She's a bright and beautiful young girl, and she's challenging, but I love her to death, and I hope that we can settle this and really start talking about microaggressions and what's really the issue that's going on. Until then, I'm sure this is pretty short for my most podcast, but I think I covered it. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to let me know. I would love to talk to people about microaggressions. I would love to see how it's affected them and how it's changed them, and how words have stuck to them and the words that they have used to get back at people, whatever it is, so that we can have a discussion on this. Please post at our YouTube site and our MaD Life website. Please give me some feedback, and if you like, I can get you on and we can have a conversation about this. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you next week. Bye.